gonna whip up sour cream noodle bake. It's an old-fashioned recipe. It's real meaty and cheesy, and my husband and kids love it. Now I've got 2.5 pounds of ground beef that's all brown. Now normally I would drain off all the fat after this, but there's hardly any fat to drain, so that's convenient for me. Now into the beef, I'll add 2 cans of just regular tomato sauce. Then I'll add a little salt and pepper. And then just to give it a little kick, I'll add some crushed red pepper, not too much. Okay, now I'm gonna let the sauce simmer. Now I have 1 pound of just regular old egg noodles. They should be ready. So I'll just drain them into a bowl. It's a really great layered dish. Really simple, but still lots of things going on. Okay, now I'll just add some creamy stuff to the noodles. First, about 2.5 cups of just regular cottage cheese. And if you think you don't like cottage cheese, don't worry, you won't even know it's in there, I promise. And then I'll add a good cup of sour cream, some salt and pepper. And then part of what makes this so delicious, I add a good amount of green onions. The green onions just add a really nice tang, a really deep flavor. And because the noodles are hot, it sort of melts the creamy mixture. All right, the creamy mixture is totally coating the noodles. So now it's just about assembling it. I'll start with 1/4 of the noodles. I'm doubling the regular recipe, so I have to keep track of the amounts I have. Just throw about 1/4 in there. That looks good. And I'll smooth them out. And then I'll just ladle 1/4 of the sauce over the noodles. The original sour cream noodle bake recipe calls for just combining all the sauce and all the noodles together. But I really like layering it because it keeps the elements separate. And then every bite you get a little bit of cheese, a little bit of creaminess. It's really nice. And then I'll top this layer with some grated sharp cheddar cheese. And I grated this myself. I like the consistency of cheese you grate yourself rather than the pre-grated stuff. Okay, now on to the next layer. Now I'll top the final layer with more cheese. Okay, now these are all assembled. I'm just gonna let them cool and pop them in the freezer, and then they'll be ready to throw in the oven whenever we want them. The guys are having a big morning of working cattle over on Tim's ranch today, and I'm making them a rib-stickin' ranch-style lunch. They are gonna be hungry when they're finished. To go with the ribs, I'm making twice-baked potato casserole. It's pretty much everything that's wonderful about twice-baked potatoes, but in casserole form. Now, of course, twice-baked potatoes in any form have to have bacon, so I fried up a bunch, and I just need to chop it up. You know, you can use store-bought bacon bits for twice-baked potatoes, but I think nothing is like bacon you fry yourself, particularly when you're cooking for cowboys. They detect things like this. They might run me out of town if they find out I used artificial bacon pieces. Okay, I got the bacon all chopped. I'll let that sit for a sec. Now I've got to add a lot of butter to this casserole because I baked a lot of potatoes. So I've got 4 sticks of softened butter. I want it to be really, really soft. Then when the warm potato mixture goes in, it melts really quickly. Okay, and 4. Then a whole container of sour cream. Everyone likes sour cream with potatoes, let's face it. Okay, now for the potatoes. I've got 16 big baking potatoes, and I rubbed them in a little bit of vegetable oil and then baked them at 400 for about an hour. They're nice and tender, very hot. So I'll just cut it in half. Ooh, nice and hot. And I'll use a little towel so it won't be too hot in my hands. And I like to use just a big tablespoon to slowly scrape the insides out. Okay, that's the last potato scooped, and I've got nice little flecks of potato skin all throughout. So now I'll season all of this. It's a lot of potato, so it needs a good amount of salt, and of course, plenty of black pepper. And then I also like to add some seasoned salt. It just adds a few different flavors, a little bit of extra saltiness. All right, that looks great. Now I'll throw in all of this delicious bacon. Okay, now the green onions go in. I also grated a lot of cheese, a couple of cups of cheddar jack, and I'll sprinkle that over the top. And then I definitely need some milk in here so that everything will mix together well. So I'll just pour in a couple of cups of milk. All right, now I just need to break out my muscles. I've got a potato masher and I'll just go right in and smush all this together. This takes a little while. There are a lot of ingredients in here. The potatoes don't have to be completely smooth, but I don't want there to be any huge chunks. Okay, looks perfect. Get the extra off. Now I'm gonna put all of this into a big foil container. I think it'll all fit. Whenever I'm making twice-baked potatoes for a crowd, it can get a little much to refill the skins after the mixture is done. This is the perfect solution. Just put it into a big pan, warm it up, and it's ready to serve. This looks amazing. There is not a cowboy on the ranch or a kid on the ranch that won't go crazy for this. Okay, now I'll just smooth out the surface. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is a great dish to make if you're having a big party because you can actually make it the day ahead and pop it in the oven when you're ready. I wasn't that organized. I did it the same day. Okay, now I'm gonna sprinkle more cheese over the top. The potato mixture has plenty inside, but I like for the top to have a nice layer of melted cheese. This is cheddar jack, but you can use all cheddar, all jack, or you could do pepper jack. That's always delicious too. Okay, now this just needs to go back into the oven for about 30 minutes until it's warmed through. Cheesy, twice-baked potato casserole. Here are the ribs. Did you guys work up an appetite?
I think everybody did.
Todd, you want some potatoes? What's up? And get the good stuff. I'm making a tater tot casserole for tomorrow. It is so wonderful. It's an all-in-one main course. It's got a great shortcut ingredient, and it's make ahead. Check, check, and check. I'm gonna assemble the casserole today and bake it tomorrow. I'm just browning some breakfast sausage with some finely diced onion. I'm gonna let the sausage cook all the way through. And while it does, I'm gonna grab that shortcut ingredient. Frozen tater tots. So easy. All I need to do is get them into a buttered baking dish. This perfect layer of tater tots is gonna get topped with the brown sausage and onions. And it's fine that this is hot. It's gonna have a chance to cool down before I add the other ingredients. Once the casserole bakes, those tater tots just turn into potatoes. You would never know they were frozen. Okay, that is all the sausage. Now I'll start working on the egg mixture. This casserole has a lot of cheese, so I'm gonna grate up some cheddar and some Monterey Jack. It's probably the cheese combination that I use the most in my kitchen. Okay, that's enough cheddar. I'll start grating the pepper jack. Love pepper jack cheese, it's so creamy and I love the spice. Okay, that's it for the cheese. Get it out of here. I've got 4 eggs that I cracked into the pitcher, and I'll add a cup of milk. It's whole milk just to make the whole thing a little more rich. And speaking of rich, a little bit of half and half, just about half a cup or so. Now the sausage is really flavorful and plenty salty, but I'm gonna add just a little bit of seasoned salt, about a 1/4 teaspoon. And for some spice, a little cayenne pepper. Really simple. And then I'll whisk this together. Okay, that is nice and mixed. So I'll add some green and red bell pepper. I seeded it and pulled out the membranes, and then I diced them really fine. Okay, the last thing to add to the egg mixture is half of this cheese. The other half is gonna go on top of the casserole. I'll give it a quick stir. And then this beautiful concoction gets poured over the sausage, which is cool by now. And look at all that chunky wonderfulness. Make sure it's all even. And then the rest of this cheese goes on top. This is a cheesy, cheesy dish. Now I've just got to cover it with foil, stash it in the fridge overnight, and tomorrow when it comes to baking and serving, well, that's going to be a cinch. I'll get the casserole into the oven at 350 degrees for 25 minutes. Then I'll take the foil off and bake it for another 20 minutes. Then when it's hot and bubbling, I'll get it out and onto the counter. And everyone will have a lovely, hearty helping. Oh boy, check out all the tater tots and sausagey, oniony, eggy cheesiness. Fantastic. Broccoli rice casserole is a cherished Thanksgiving staple. I started by sauteing some finely minced onion with a little bit of garlic in butter. It's nice and soft. So I'm gonna move forward with making a scrumptious sauce. I'm gonna thicken it up with flour, about 1/4 cup. And I let the flour cook just a little bit. So I'm gonna add 1/2 teaspoon of mustard powder and 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. So I'll stir those in. Ooh, that cayenne, I kinda got a little whiff of it. So now I've got 3 cups of whole milk. I'm gonna turn the heat up just a little bit, and I'll stir the onion and flour mixture while I pour in the milk. Now I need to let this heat up, and it's gonna bubble up and thicken. That'll take about 3 minutes. Amazing. I'm gonna make the sauce a little more creamy by adding some cream cheese. I'm gonna kind of break it up as I add it. I'm gonna add some grated Parmesan. Okay, that is looking good. So I'll grab some salt and pepper. And I like to add quite a bit of pepper. You really can't add too much pepper. At least in my neck of the woods, you can't. And I've got some paprika, and I'll just add about 1/2 teaspoon. So I'll mix that in. So much flavor. Okay, now the cheeses for broccoli rice casserole are very important. You've got to start with good old processed cheese. I cut it into cubes. There is nothing creamier than this cheese when you add it to a sauce. Now I've got some freshly grated sharp cheddar, and I'm gonna add about 1.5 cups, and I'll save the rest to go over the casserole when it goes into the oven. So you're probably wondering, well, what about the broccoli? That goes in now. I've got 8 small heads. Make sure all that broccoli is coated in the cheesy goodness. Okay, it's pretty thick, but that's exactly what you want. So I'm gonna add some sliced pimentos. Pimentos are something I have in my pantry all the time because there are so many casseroles that I'll just kind of add a jar to. This is really looking perfect. So I'll turn off the heat. And now it's time to assemble the casserole, which is so much fun. I've got some cooked long grain rice, and I'm gonna add 1/2 of this bowl to the casserole. Spread out the rice, and then 1/2 of this luscious broccoli cheese sauce goes in, and then the rest of the rice goes on. The rest of the sauce, and the rest of the grated sharp cheddar. Now I'm gonna put this into the oven at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. I'm gonna be heading to church soon, and I cannot wait because that means I'm gonna get to eat this beautiful broccoli rice casserole at the potluck. How good does this look? I cannot recommend this enough. You dive in, and at this point, words fail me. Looks so good. Obviously, at a potluck, there'd be a lot more food to go with it, but I just wanted to show you its deliciousness. The star of the show is a chicken tortilla casserole. It's really hearty and just dripping with all the things my family loves. I've just got some onions in the skillet with a little olive oil, and I just threw them in to get them a little soft before I move forward. I love this casserole. It's really hearty. It's actually a version of a casserole my friend Pastor Ryan used to make. It was sort of a Mexican lasagna. It's just full of deliciousness. All right, the onions are already getting nice and soft, so I'll add in some garlic, several cloves, and I just minced it really fine. And then I'll add some spices. A couple of teaspoons of chili powder, a teaspoon of paprika, beautiful color, and a teaspoon of ground cumin, which I love to put in so many of my Tex-Mex recipes. Now I'll just stir it, and I want those spices to really coat the onions. I don't want the tomatoes to completely fall apart, and that's why I wait until the onions have started to soften before I add them in. Now I'm just gonna stir them around and let them cook for a couple of minutes. Now, the tomato mixture could not look any more delicious, and it smells divine. I'm gonna go ahead and get it out of the pan. This adds such amazing flavor to the casserole. I just love it. Now I'm gonna crank the heat up on the stove, drizzle in a little olive oil, and I'll move on with the next step. There are a lot of steps and a lot of ingredients to this casserole, but nothing is complicated at all. I've got some boneless, skinless chicken breasts, and I just cut them into bite-sized pieces. And I'm gonna season them with the same seasonings I used for the onion mixture. This chicken could not look any more glorious. I'm gonna move forward and make a sauce out of this. And all I need to do is add a little water. And then I'll just stir the chicken around. Now the sauce just needs to bubble up and reduce a bit. Now to add to the chicken, I've got some pinto beans and kidney beans. I just drained them and rinsed them. And they'll just make the filling of the casserole that much more hearty. I'll just pour half of the jar of salsa verde all over the bottom of this casserole dish. I'll start with a layer of 6. They'll overlap and cover the bottom of the pan just perfectly. Now, I've just got some plain cooked rice, just regular long grain white rice, and I'm just putting it in a single layer on top of the tortillas. Nothing fancy about this. Now, what makes it fancy is this delicious tomato mixture I made, and I'll just sprinkle it over the rice. This is such an easy recipe. You can use frozen corn if that's what you got. If you have a little extra time, you can shave kernels off the corn and use fresh. Anything works. All right, now it's time for this delicious chicken and bean mixture. It's been cooling and it looks so good. This is adding all the protein to the dish. I'll just sprinkle it on and spread it out. And I'll just pour on a nice layer. I'm gonna make sure it gets in the cracks. And then I'll add the rest of the jar of salsa verde. Just kind of go in between. Ooh, I love this mix. And then half of the cheese goes on. I love putting all the cheese toward the top because as it bakes in the oven, it just drips down into the cracks and makes it so gooey. All right, and then a second layer of corn tortillas. These sort of hold the whole casserole together. It has a base and a top. Now I'll end with a good layer of the homemade enchilada sauce. I'm not gonna use all of this for this casserole, but this sauce keeps in a jar in the fridge. And then the rest of the cheese. You have got to have a hearty appetite when you eat this dish. All right, the casserole is all assembled. Now I'm just gonna cover it with foil and keep it in the fridge until I head home. Then tonight, all I have to do is bake it at 375 degrees for 20 minutes. Take the foil off and cook it for another 15 to 20 minutes. Then when it's hot and bubbly, it's done. I'll let it sit a while so it'll hold up together when I serve it. Then everyone gets a great big helping with some sour cream on the side and a sprig of cilantro.